Hi and welcome to the ILC Home and Property Claims webinar series, building up to our specialist conference, the Environmental Challenges of Property Claims. This conference will be held at the Oval in London on the 9th of June. If you're looking for tickets and information, either look on the ILC website or drop me a note at alan@iloveclaims.com. My name's Alan Sitter. I'm the chair of the ILC Home and Property section. I want to say a big thanks to all our corporate partners, Carpenters Group, Claims Consortium Group, CoreLogic, iCab and Innovation Group for their continued support. This allows us to bring you the webinar series, and it also allows us to bring our events at a much more reasonable rate to you. ILC, of course, is an organisation which for a number of years now has been bringing us some ideas and thought-provoking challenges from you, the claims people. We're not the people with the ideas, it's your world and the changes and moves forward that we can make, usually the ideas of people from all places within our process. So, as we look forward to the conference, the first in the webinar series, let's take a look at what we've got today. And in the first of the webinars, it's going to take a look as we move towards the environmental conference. I've invited 4 very knowledgeable people to take a look at automation and the impact that automation can have, but not just environmentally, because that also leads on to efficiencies, cost, customer service, resilience, etc. It's very difficult to separate them all. But of course, it does lend itself to a better and more practical, sustainable solution for the claims industry. So we're going to take a look at it as wide an area as we can. And to help us do that today, I've got Will Quibell of Admiral. I've got Ian Marsh from Saga, Brian Ford from GTEC Partners, exclusive reseller for Silver Cloud. And I've got Marambe from Procurato. So gentlemen, first of all, welcome. This is a kind of high level discussion as we move towards the 9th of June. So I guess, Will, I can perhaps go to you first and say, from an environmental perspective and wider, what do you see as the clear benefits of any automation that we can put into the systems at the moment?
Good morning, Alan. Yeah, good question. I work in the household insurance space, and I think automation is a hot topic for us at the moment. Not one really that too many large insurers have cracked. I think the really key and important driver with automation in the household or home space is to balance the benefits of automation with the claims and the cases where customers actually need human help. But I think when it comes to automating claims, if we look at the storms we've just had 3 storms in a week in the UK, and a lot of those claims will end up in the supply chain and with building repair networks, and a lot of those building repairers will be drafted in from areas outside of their geographical location. So there is quite a large environmental impact there. If you send a builder from Cardiff to Bristol rather than from Bath to Bristol, it's going to have a big environmental impact. And so by automating claims that can churn out cash settlements to customers quickly for those who want them, then they can employ local trades and local suppliers rather than this kind of mass BRN approach that the market often takes for benefit but has an environmental impact. So I think in the home and household space, Alan, there's a balance between the tangible economic benefits and whether they do or they don't exceed the customer experience. So I think for high volume, low value, the ability to automate as quickly and as efficiently as possible will reduce life cycles. Every day that you can shave off a claim in the home or household space will have a benefit to the environmental impact.
Okay, yeah, and I guess we'll learn a lot more about automation that we have or could have as we go through that very process of the 3 storm claims of last week. And unless the Gulf Stream is changing, we might have more coming up. So Brian, over to you then. And coming in, I know you have a connection to content solutions, etc. But what do you think of the clear benefits of automation that can affect the claims process and the environment?
Yeah, thanks, and I agree with Will's sentiments there as well. I think many of the back office processes that are in place now are fairly repetitive, and they do make sort of good candidates for automation. And I think as Will touched on there, we've just had some recent storms, right, which has caused quite a lot of damage and impact to various people across the country. So the ability to be able to scale quickly is one of the benefits of automation. So having that automation in place gives you that sort of foundation to build on, and when you need to scale, you can scale quickly. Which is something which is really, really important now. And based on those labor-intensive processes that are there at the moment, they can be time-consuming and prone to human error. So having the automation foundation in place does allow you to reduce errors potentially and reduce the time taken to work on a claim. And I think that's exactly what customers want. They want that sort of improved customer experience, which then in turn drives trust. And trust is all important in our industry, and that can lead also to customer and brand loyalty, which is what we all want in the marketplace today. And I think just from the insurer themselves, improving those efficiencies just does help to reduce costs. We heard at the last conference, tail end of last year, Alan, how the cost ratios are pretty high. So any saving to that is it goes straight to the bottom line. So all good on there. But I think the key thing is driving automation helps you to scale. It reduces the repetitiveness of or the labor intensity of some of those repetitive transactions or tasks, and leads to, I say, the operational excellence and the cost reduction, which then drives the customer trust and customer loyalty. So that for me are some of the key benefits of automation.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I think both make some very good, valid points there. But with Ian, I want to ask the same question about where are the clear benefits of automation, but also refer back to previous discussions we've had on webinars with Ian over the course of the pandemic, where I think we were all pleasantly surprised by the take-up of some forms of automation, be it video automation, from a very high percentage of the traditional Saga customer base. So you must have already seen some clear benefits of automation and be able to identify some more because of that, Ian.
Yeah, absolutely. I think first of all, I'd just like to say ditto with regards to Will and Brian. Obviously, there come up some really good points there. Obviously at Saga, the actual genre of the customer, looking at probably circa average of 60 upwards on our policy book. We started to go down the automation process, or just making the process a little bit easier, probably around about 3 years ago. So we're talking about pre-COVID, just using the live video tool, so we can actually assess intelligently root claims. And I think I said before, Alan, is that we were surprised at the take up by a clientele. I think people have this perception, if you're old, you don't like technology. Firstly, I'm nearly 60. I don't mind a little bit of technology. So it was actually proven even before we went into COVID that actually there is an appetite out there, and that appetite goes right across all age groups, not just the younger age group where potentially people are actually targeted beforehand. COVID has come along. It's I can use the word forced. It's forced probably some of the older people to actually start using technology that they wouldn't have used. They've started using FaceTime to go and speak to their family, etc. when we was in lockdown. So all of this is actually added to the amount of technology that is actually accepted by our customer. I think I just really want to spell out that it is a misnomer that if you're in the older age groups, you don't like using technology, because quite clearly they do want to use technology. And some of the information we've used on the video in particular, we can sort of tell what devices they're actually ringing from. And quite a few have got the most up-to-date iPhones, Android phones, tablets, etc. Whether or not they've obviously just been given to them by members of their family, obviously with lockdown, they were obviously buying bits and pieces like that. So that's the first part with regards to technology. Going forward, obviously, with regard to environmental, we have to just look at, I think, first of all, how's the claim reported? And I do agree with Brian and Will there, is that we've got some customers that do want to talk to us. So it's a really fine balance between those who want to talk to us and actually those that are prepared to actually use some sort of automation. We then need to look how we get that information from us to our primary suppliers. So technology that's out there that we can do that. We can assign claims. We can have a complete transparency on our claims as well. And I think what we found, and Will may be able to comment a little bit, is that within the actual supply industry, you've still got this way of handling claims that's probably we've done for the last 4 decades. And they're still following that very linear type approach to claims handling. Give you, for instance, done a little bit of work probably a couple of years ago, and we established that each building job had 2.2 variations. But the problem is they're sending that variation through from the secondary supplier. It then gets stuck in some work stream somewhere. Obviously, the builder's then taken his contractors off site. He's obviously had to put them onto another job. They then obviously come along and approve that variation, get back to the contractor. Then you've got about another 2 or 3 weeks to get that contractor back on site again. And believe it or not, we're still seeing that happening. So that's something else that we need to have a look at. So it's just really the technology that the primary supplier engages with the secondary supplier. You know, there's no reason why at this time, with everything's readily available at a really cheap cost, why can a contractor not ring up the primary supplier on site, say this needs to be done, he uploads the variation, this is the cost of it, and then they approve it, so the contractor stay on site and obviously get the repair done. You know, life cycle saves me money. Reducing life cycle must also actually save the supplier money as well. So just some food for thought for the conversation going forward.
Yeah, I think they are, but Ian, I think it's very good food for thought, and it kind of moves on to Marco. So from the procurement and process angle, Marco, surely there are some far more clear benefits of automation once we can find a proper way to engage with it and invest in it. And a lot of that automation isn't new to the rest of the world or parts of the other industries, but it's something that we sometimes seem to struggle for understandable reasons of margins and cost, etc., to get in. So what do you think are the clear benefits of automation? And feel free to take it further than we're taking it so far.
Indeed. So I think, I'd probably echo what a lot of the comments which have been made to date, or just now with by Ian or Brian or Willie. So my point here is probably from a wider perspective. I think the insurance industry as a whole feels that automation is something which is clearly beneficial, because on a recent stat, I read that on average 30% plus feel that they're behind the automation curve to where they'd like to be at this point in time. A lot of people talk about in the industry where I think they have a sense that others are further advanced in their automated experience or in their processing of the claims as such. But in our experience with some of the clients that we work, this is not necessarily very homogeneously reflected across the clients. In fact, I'd say that actually there are aspects of the automation process which some insurers are doing specifically around the context of how their customers operate. And in fact, I think that's where we have seen a lot of the benefits. The benefits really have been driven with those customers, with those insurers who've actually sat down and really understood the customer's journey. I think this is to touch on Ian's point just a bit earlier on. There are different customer bases that insurers have, and where we have seen success with some of the insurers is where they've actually spent a lot of time up front in actually understanding the customer and what the customer sees as a benefit for them in terms of automating the process. So, where they feel like having, a chatbot or robot process automation or machine learning is valuable is very different from customer base to customer base. So there's no point trying to automate some aspects where a customer might require a bit more hands-on approach or would like a hand-holding in some of the parts of the process. So the benefits there are very much around customer satisfaction. I think you alluded to a point there, Alan, around clear benefits. It's a bit of a misnomer or false expectations that savings that can be done on things like headcount on the operations is what can then be reinvested to improve your process. The reality is those departments and claims handling departments are already quite lean and have already been through quite a few processes of making them more efficient and lean in terms of how they operate. But what they haven't necessarily been able to put in place is the right automation to allow their work to be a lot more smoother and efficient. So going back to the points that some of the guys made just now, the reality is the benefit comes from what we would say in the procurement industry is total cost of ownership, really. It is effectively the efficiency that is bringing to the entire process, which actually removes things like duplication or having to go back and resolving issues. And again, I think there was an example there about the supply chain going back and having to do things. That's where the cost efficiency comes, and that's where it's very clear and tangible in terms of the savings as such.
Good points. Will, back to you. You mentioned earlier on there was an immediate environmental impact. In some ways, settling, you can get local tradesmen involved, and that's a very important one. Are there other things that we could, some with more difficulty than others, I guess, introduce into the claims process, which would have the impact, positive impact on the environment, and also a positive impact on things like resilience, because it would free up resource to operate elsewhere. And also, I think, to start to move into, if we could get more automation early in the process, does that begin to give us more intelligence with how something like the 3 storms of last week and the claims are going to progress through? Because, the story for this is a couple of weeks away yet, really, isn't it?
Yes, correct. If we go back to the storms of the last week or so, Alan, what automation needs to be able to do in our market, which frankly it doesn't really at the moment, is identify which customers or which properties or which customers and which properties would have a propensity to want a quick exit, a quick repair, a quick cash settlement. All of those things that Brian mentioned. Every day you take a day off a claim, you reduce the life cycle, you will improve the environmental impact. But the challenge, not in all spots of our sector, but certainly in home and household, the challenge is that pricing is soft. It's really soft. And the problem with that is that if we look at lots of other different elements of the economy, different markets, different industries at the moment, the cost of things are going up in everywhere. Everything that we pay something for is going up at the moment in the UK. The home market isn't. Now, value measures might impact that. However, the cost of a home insurance policy in the UK is still phenomenally low. And as long as it remains low and soft, then the ability to be able to automate will be limited for insurers or their supply chain. There's critical mass out there to be able to do it. There's enough claims in the system, but whilst there isn't enough fat in there, it will always be a challenge. So, for example, build back better or flood resilience measures are really important and will have an impact on the environment. But at the moment, most home insurers are, particularly with claims like wet peril claims, EOW, escape of water and flood, have suffered from loss ratio deterioration for a number of years. And so the competing priorities of profit, margin, loss ratio, average cost per claim, and environmental impact and doing the right thing and building back better, they're butting heads quite a lot in the home space. So pricing needs to be addressed at some point. It's not sustainable. And in terms of other areas, I think in the main, in the home space, there's really 3 types of claims for most perils. You've got your low value, high volume, single touch claims. Then you've got your mid range, where there might be a couple of touches, and then you've got your complex. And even a £15,000 fire or wet peril claim can be quite complex. So the really key thing with automating in the home and household space, Alan, is to identify which claims shouldn't be automated. Because if we push claims through the automation process that either aren't right for automation or the customer doesn't want it, then it's having the reverse effect. It will actually have a detrimental impact on the environment because it will extend the life cycle. So yeah, I think pricing and which claims and which data we choose to use to identify those claims is going to be critical going forward. No one's really cracked it at the moment in the home space.
Okay, no, I think that's fair. Brian, Will quite rightly points out there the thing that overrides all of our discussions, which are about margins, and you raised it earlier yourself, loss ratios, etc. But what are the impacts of perhaps the new entrants being able to come in and have wider implications because they can adapt much more flexibly to some of the automation, have it in the process from a very early stage? How big an implication is that towards traditional insurers, or are there ways traditional insurers, for whom it's difficult to, as Will says, change the processes to that extent? Are there going to be easier ways for them to pick the right bits of automation? Because as Will said, whether you say we're picking the ones for automation or we're picking the ones that are not for automation, the more we can put down that route that are appropriate for that route, then it would seem logical that the better the loss ratios become.
Yeah, excuse me. Agreed, Alan. And it's not impossible for the more traditional insurers to embark on a transformation journey in this space. It's just slightly harder because they do have a lot of legacy implications, systems in the back end potentially. We still got mainframes running, which are expensive, not great environmentally because they chew up a lot of resources as well. But those factors have to be considered. It's hard to make change sometimes in an organization that's been operating for a while. But some of these new entrants are starting afresh. They can build their operating models and their businesses and their systems from scratch. So it's easier for them. But I'd say, all around, Alan, to your point and to Will's point, we shouldn't be looking to try and automate everything. There's going to be areas that are easier to automate than others. Why don't folks focus on those? In terms of getting a return on investment, proving that it works, showing those increased efficiencies, showing in a claims perspective, the reduced settlement times potentially, the reduced customer efforts, getting those quicker wins in place, which then can be justified to the sort of decision makers up the tree in terms of we were realizing the benefits that we set out to achieve from this investment in automation, and I think that's important. There's a lot of programs and transformation initiatives that get undertaken that 2, 3, 4 years down the line are still not fully live or showing the benefits that they should. And I just think a different mindset on that should be adopted. Go for something that's relatively easy. Go with a proof of concept. Go with a pilot. Trial something and quickly shut it down if it's not working, and show benefits if it is. And I think that's the key, just sort of moving it then further within the organization, because change is hard. And bringing about that change to an organization while folks are still trying to do their day jobs and keep up with the current demand that's going there is not easy at the best of times. So these things have to be well managed, well coordinated, well funded, with a realistic set of benefits that organizations are trying to achieve from that, and those will come. If the focus is right, if the priorities are right. And my take as well, seeing these things be really successful is adopting that sort of 80-20 rule. We know we can't automate everything. Let's use the tools for what they are good at, leverage those capabilities and show those ROIs as quickly as possible, in order to, I say, get the get the buy-in for further investment across the organization. So, content claims is a great example, Alan, just sort of, do a pilot, do a proof of concept on that, leveraging automation. It's a good area, a good line of business to start with, to trial, to make sure it's going to work through the rest of the organization. So that would be my observation on it, really, Alan, is just don't try and boil the ocean, really. Just start and get a return and show some bang for the buck, and then start gradually increasing that investment across the organization. So no reason why the more legacy carriers can't benefit from it as well. It just needs to be planned better and managed very carefully.
Yeah, I think so. And to be fair, I alluded to in the early part of this webinar, over the last 2 years, and we've all surprised each other by the length we can move some things forward.
Yeah.
System, people are able to work at home. I mean, it sounds kind of normal now, but years ago when this all first broke, we couldn't believe some of the things that we achieved literally overnight. It was phenomenal. But Ian, we've talked about this before. So, at Saga, you've done pilots before. You've shared that with us before. I think we did one with the tapping sure stops and a few other things, which had an impact. But we've also had a chat about what the transformation process might be and how challenging it is. And this isn't necessarily a size thing always with insurers. It can just be how it's set up. So how easy is it to do, if we look at the wider implications, how easy is it to do a pilot on either areas or on specific types of claim when you have systems which are kind of pretty heavily set?
It's incredibly difficult, and I think obviously I do support what Will said about pricing as well. Just to sort of touch on that, it's going to be a very brave insurer who wants to increase their rates by 20% in order that they can actually match environmental, obviously parts of the environmental act going through. So it is very difficult from the pricing perspective. And obviously we've got market study that's going to have an impact as well. We've all just done our first reports back to the FCA on that. So that's going to have a massive impact as well. It's incredibly difficult. Obviously I have a policy book, probably half or less of that of which Will's got at Admiral. But obviously the cost of integration is the same. So I have to bear that in mind. Then obviously you may have 4 different systems that you would have to connect with. So you're going to have your pricing systems, you're going to have your underwriting systems, you're going to have your financial systems, and you're going to have your banking systems. And I think as Marco alluded to earlier, we're all using different platforms. So then actually, when you then start the integration, you've got to integrate with all them 4 in order that you can do the ultimate, which is what we're all aiming for, which is a straight through process. So I think obviously from my perspective, and again, I'll go back to what Brian's just said, is it from acorns, mighty oaks grow? And I think you really need to have that mentality. You need to start where you think you can make an impact. And then once you start that and it's running and you can demonstrate to the business, that this is cost neutral, that's really quite important. It is working, it is having an impact. Then you can then start saying, well, okay, do I really need to look at claims for televisions? Do I really need to have a look at a claim for somebody who wants to put a claim in for frozen food? So, and I think you just begin to sort of grow and then add to the processes or any applications that you've actually got in place. But, it is difficult. I've been trying to get an application onboarded probably for about circa 18 months. And, you've got to get all the resources together from all these different departments in order that they can actually do all of the applications, they can do the APIs, all of this goes through with it. But ultimately, you still need to get a payment out to the customer. So this is, all of this integration, it is really difficult. And as I say, as Will says, is that we are constantly clashing. I'd love to say we are going to do this, we're going to do that, but that's going to put a price on to our premium. So, will our customer base be happy to pay 20% extra because we're trying to do X, Y, and Z? So it's a challenge, and it's going to be a challenge continually.
Okay, thanks for that. Marco, I guess I'm going to push the hard part of this question onto you. We've asked what are the wider implications. There's new entrants who don't have to go through the process that some people do. Does environmental impacts mean more cost, or actually does automation through environmental impact mean that we reduce the process, we can reduce the cost and make ourselves more customer friendly? And in reality, have we got any choice but to find ways that we can automate and automate quickly? Otherwise, we're going to have difficulty servicing things, and perhaps the cost ratios will increase as processes stumble.
Yeah, I agree, Alan. I think, interesting, just to throw another sort of stat there, I've read where that this is one of the big sort of consultancy firm surveys, which they surveyed a lot of clients, insurance clients, and they've effectively said that if there is no automation, 41% of them were prepared to change insurance provider. Now, there's a very straightforward benefit there, right? Being up with the times and moving across and doing the right thing from that point of view is clearly quite important for insurers to sort of keep themselves up to speed. But I echo some of the points which have just been made. It has to be about automating in the right way, starting from the smaller things, the things which are easily approachable, things which are quantifiable, talking about Brian's point earlier on. When you're talking about contents, for example, it is something which is already price listed. There's a database there. It's easier to go through the straight through processing in those kind of contexts. Ultimately, that saves time, which, and I think a point was made earlier on about this. Time saving is not only a benefit for the insurer and the supply chain, it is also a benefit for the customer, and something that they see as something which is valuable for them, because most customers want to get their claims settled as quickly as possible. I think that's just their human nature. So then looking at it from an environmental point of view, clearly the benefits are there. They're there from how the technological aspect helps to ensure that you're not necessarily traveling or moving across, from the thing that I think the insurance industry has been trying to tackle for many years, the loss adjusting service, how much of it can be done remotely. That has in itself quite a large impact in how much the process of managing a claim has from a carbon impact point of view. So I think certainly there is a lot of value and a lot of benefit that can be brought by this. It can be expensive as a start, but I think that you can drive it to that cost neutral point where you want to be. And it is something that I think we won't have a choice in many ways, because legislature and change from that point of view will probably force a lot of the industry to have to do some of these things.
I think that's fair point, but it's still challenging for the people in situ account insurers to have to get this. So let's move on to the next bit. Well, are there, and if there are, where are the quick wins? And perhaps what we can do quick and easy, which will, help the process, help free up the resource to deal with some of the resilience issues, and perhaps give you some of the information that will help process it. So are there quick wins we can make in automation?
Yes, I think leveraging data is out there. Insurers have a wealth, a bank of data. Whether they understand how to interpret it is another thing. But I think leveraging data to make precise offers to customers is something that really hasn't been extrapolated, not particularly in the market I'm in home and household, Alan. But the challenge there is that it becomes experimental. So where home and motor, for example, would really differ, if it's a write-off, a first-party write-off damage claim of a Ford Mondeo from 2012, it's relatively easy to automate what settlement would be. In the home space, it's experimental, because who's to say that we have any data that would really be able to determine the size, cost, construction type of your house. And the difficulty with being experimental is that one really has to understand if that goes against one of the key principles of insurance, which is indemnity. You can't experiment with indemnity. It's what the customer is contractually entitled to. So for me, the big opportunity in home and household is to leverage the data that currently exists to make precise offers that don't take us down an experimental route. And for me, that hasn't really been explored yet with any depth or scale.
Okay. Brian, over to you, and I guess I know where you might go with some of this, but where are the easy wins? You've already said that if we're going to have easy wins, one of the easy ways to do it is try and find ways where people can do some sort of testing and some sort of pilots. And I've explained that we have insurers, as Ian's already said, that are quite keen in that process to see what happens. So where are the quick wins?
So just agreeing with Will there, I think for me, the contents claims side is a good one to start with. You know, it's a known quantity. I think Marco mentioned earlier, there's a database of products there. We kind of know what they are. The insurance companies have their panel suppliers. It's a good area to automate to work out, you know, from the FNOL through to the identification of the appropriate replacement item, to the quantification of that item, through to settlement. You know, for me, it looks on paper like one of the easiest areas to start looking at STP and automation. You know, vehicles is more complicated. You know, property claims there's a lot more stakeholders in the process. For me, it's the contents claims part that is a really, really good candidate to go in via those pilots or proof of concepts and show how it can work. There's some good technology across that process landscape, Alan, and it opens up opportunities. You know, it will help the pricing. It's got sustainability and environmental positive impacts, because you can, you know, the old debate about repair versus replace. You know, what is the actual total cost of doing either of those? You know, and carbon emissions needs to come into it. There's no point in loading up a fridge on the back of a truck to go back for repairs to bring it back again. You know, the journeys and the emissions on that is it not easier just to replace it and sustainably dispose of the old item, which the insurers can help with, you know, because they've got the supply chain to support that. So for me, that's the area that is crying out for investment and proving that it can work. And from there, you know, additional lines of business can be taken on once you've got those foundations in place. You know, there's a lot of software out there to support those activities at the moment in the content claims space, and you know, syncing in with what's already in place within those insurers. You know, the supply chains, the settlement systems, it's all there, and you know, it starts to give the claimants and the customers a choice of settlement. You know, now it's not just a drop shipped item or a settlement into a bank account. We can also start looking at things like vouchers. You know, if your replacement item was the iPad 2 and you wanted the iPad 3, you know, take the voucher and go and pay the difference, kind of thing. Or, you know, there's virtual MasterCards out there now. There's prepaid debit cards. There's various options that, you know, there's a lot there. There's a lot of technology out there, Alan, which can support that part of the business. And for me, that's where it is. And again, down to the sustainability, it's something which the automation can help control. It's reducing the touch points. It's eliminating some of that excess stages of the process, which don't necessarily need to all be there. You know, making it lean, as Marco said, and supporting that leanness with automation to bring down those operating costs. So for me, that's an area where I see as something that's a very, very promising candidate to show the benefits of automation.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a fair point. Also, you know, you open an interesting point that we will deal with in a further which is the assumption that repair of some of these things is more environmentally friendly. That's we need to go into deeper to get the balance of that right. I guess it's over to you, Ian, then. What are the quickest wins, do you think, in automation? We really have a quick impact to try stuff out?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, without following Will too much, sorry about this, Will. It's got to be data, and I think the situation is that I have access to actuarial data, but it's just giving me real headlines. It's not telling me anything further. So I think getting that data, particularly from our supply chain, because they have got great granular information that we can actually utilise, especially when we actually go into an automated process. So we've actually got something that we can benchmark against. So data, yes, because I don't want our guys sitting on the phones for an hour gaining all of this absolute priceless information as part of the FNOL, because the whole idea of automation is to reduce that process, to make it easier for the customer to actually make a claim. Automation wise, I think obviously getting some sort of ENO in place, simplistic ENO, but provides us with good detail. I think that's really quite important, so that when that lands on the insurer's desk or the handler's desk, they know, well, this is a large file, we do need to get it out to our supply chain. I actually know it's a really straightforward claim that we can actually handle. So I'll give the customer a call. So as I said, acorns and mighty oaks on the ENOL process, and just build it up to see what we can achieve. Those are sort of things that readily come to mind. I think one of the things that we're looking at and using a lot now is robotics. So we're actually trying to prevent things like double keying, making sure that, ultimately all insurers would just like to answer the call and saying, what are you claiming for? How much are you claiming? Validating it and settling it. So I think basically we're utilising this year in particular robotics, just to make sure that it just collates that information that's readily available in their own systems, and it can just download it to our handler, so that information's there, and it's just a quick one question, and then they can just move on and talk to the customer. So that's where I see the quick wins. But data is essential, obviously, because as Will says, you just can't hope that you're going to give somebody the best value. You have to make sure that they do benefit from the policy that they've bought.
No, but I absolutely agree with you, Will, over that. Marco, where's the quick wins then? Looking from a procurement consultant perspective, where are the quick wins? And how, there's a balance here, so I'm going to give you a really awkward question, which you can try and find a political answer to if you can. What's the balance between ability of insurers to implement some of that easy automation, or how much of the difficulty is their systems or their approach and attitude?
Yeah, so just by starting probably around, again, having worked with some of our clients, we've actually seen an interesting position where a quarter of one of the clients, referring back to Ian's point, a quarter of the clients used eFNOL. So, and that the more important aspect of it is actually that it was unrelated to the type of claim, whether it was property or, we're talking contents, whether it's motor or others as such. That was really an interesting finding that we had as part of that process, because it just gives you a sense that, that's a quick win, somewhere where you can quickly implement automation and then build it from there, again, to the point that Ian has just made. So in terms of balance of probability and ability as such, the reality is there's again, this was a point which was made earlier on, there's issues around legacy systems and various things there for you to be able to automate and move quite rapidly on trying to get these quick wins. But there are obviously providers out there who can provide that wrapper, that sort of intermediate place which can layer on top of the legacy systems for you to implement things like the chatbots and the various automated systems to make your process a bit quicker. And I think that's certainly one of the things that, as a insurer, you could look into as a potential quick win. But clearly, I think I'll refer back to the same point of before. It really isn't about trying to put in place a platform and then adapting your claims process around that, or trying to put down the objective of the business and try and operate around automating that way. It's very much about actually starting with the customer and understanding what benefits can be brought in there and how it can be adapted, so that the quick wins are very much dependent on what your customers' requirements are. And if it is things like the enol, because your customer base has a significant amount of people which would be easily, much more attuned or happy to use the enol approach, then that's something that could be an easy quick win. Going back to the other point, yeah, clearly, things which are quantified already, where you don't need necessarily a professional service going out there and assessing, surveying to settle a claim, those kind of things. Just to reiterate what we talked about around contents before, that's certainly something which is a quick win. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a sense of the legacy question, which I think, it's very much something which is a conundrum, I would say, for quite a number of insurers.
The final question, an area I'd really like to throw out, we've touched it, is on data impact and advantages. Now, and I don't know if this is just circular, Will, if we can automate, we will get the sort of data and information that will allow us to choose what we should automate. So it's a bit circular to some extent, but what are the advantages you think, you've already touched on some of them, that automation will give us in terms of data?
That's a tricky question. I think policyholders might want choice, but policyholders might not want choice. There's a large customer demographic in the UK, a really large customer demographic. So I think automation needs to be able to determine which customers want choice and which customers want help. If the customer wants help, then it's probably not right for automation with many claims. If they want choice, then it can be automated depending on what that choice is. So for me, at the moment, as head of supply chain at a top 10 UK home insurer, what I want to be able to understand, the data that I need and want at my fingertips, is what can automation tell me which customers don't want automation? Can it tell me which customers want help? And can it tell me which customers want to deal with a human? If it can do that, then everything else can go through the automation route if it's a non-complex claim. So I think understanding what the customer wants through automation is going to be key in home, which is the space I'm in.
That is circular, isn't it? Because if you go through an automation process, you would probably find out that data, but how many people would you have cheesed off by sending down the wrong route first? So I think the point's very valid. It is. From your perspective, Brian, what real advantages to data and impact? I guess the first thing is it gives you instant tracking of what's going on, which might have been very useful last week to see, right, where's everything lying, who's got it, who might want to settle in one way or another way. But you still have to go through that process a few times before that data is live and available to you to speed up the sort of storm settlements.
Yeah, agreed, and totally echo what Will said. There's a vast spectrum of customers out there. Some who want more automation or more, and others want just less sort of automation and technical side, and just want to talk to someone on the phone. So there is a broad need out there, and it's hard to tell, who wants what. But I think, I agree, Alan. It does take up time to build up some of that data, but most organizations have got a lot of that data. The amount of data sitting in data lakes and databases across those organizations, from an underwriting perspective, from a claims perspective, the data is there. It's just putting it into the right tools to leverage it, to spot trends, to identify where the business needs to speed up, slow down, move, pivot, whatever it might be. A lot of that data is there. It just may not necessarily be being used or is easily accessible in some instances. I say there's some data sitting on mainframes, and how do people get hold of that? There could be books that are still running but aren't necessarily active, but just for regulatory reasons people need to keep all that data, and it's not easy to access. But I'd say, just if we shift it forward a bit, I think data can play an important role. So just from the customer experience perspective, there's no reason why information can't be pre-populated when somebody's working on a form, whether that's on a browser or on a phone or on a tablet. Making that customer experience easy. As a customer myself, nothing infuriates me than having to put my name and address in 3 times when dealing with one particular interaction with the organization. And I kind of think it's ludicrous. You've got all that information. You know who I am. Pull it through. It's just making that. And I think the leveraging the multi-channel experience. Will raised a good point about some people want to do things automatically and some want to speak to someone, but there may be someone who wants to start something online and then call the help desk or call the call center. So, all of that should be readily and easily available, and using the automation and underlying technology, it does make that experience better for customers, because we want them to have a better omni-channel experience and make their choice as to how they interact with the carriers. And for me, it's also about the leveraging of that data. It could also reduce customer effort and make those whole processes and a claims experience that much easier. And the data then also leads to faster settlement. If you've got your data behind you, you know what item is being claimed for, what the value is. There's no reason why that data can then not help you settle that much quicker, which again improves the customer experience. So for me, there's a lot of positive uses of data, and a good sort of policy and approach on the usage of data, and that can be a competitive advantage if it's used carefully.
Thanks, Brian. Ian, I think, we've talked about you in the past being able to try things, and I think it's fundamental that we probably have to find a way to move forward quickly together. In terms of data, I think in a conversation we've had over the last few days, you get some pretty good data warning you of what was about to happen. Is that a lead into the sort of data that we then have to take through so we can plan how we're going to deal with the sort of incidents that we've had in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously with the last storm Eunice, we probably had about a 5-day warning that obviously Eunice was coming in. And to be quite frank with you, the actual track of it and the actual outcomes was spot on. So what we knew at day 5, slight reduction in wind speeds, but actually what had then occurred on Friday and Saturday, we had known. And it's actually something that we're looking into as a business. Obviously, we've had various surge meetings that have been going on now. And I think obviously, especially with our pricing guys, is that, we will be provided by our weather supplier postcodes that are going to be impacted. It's going to tell us approximately what the wind speeds are going to be in that area. Then you just need to overlay that onto our policy book to then really start understanding, well, what areas of the country is it going to hit? What are the properties predominantly like? How are they built? Are they quite old housing stock? Are they quite new housing stock? So I think there's a lot we can do in the future, utilising all that data that's coming through. At the moment, we take a little bit of, I've used the word the punt, but it might be the wrong word, and I do apologise to people. But, we know the wind speed's over 50. It's unlikely we might get a small uplift. If it's over 60, actually, then it's going to be quite a larger uplift. Once wind speeds hit 70 miles an hour, we know that it's going to be quite a serious event. And I think basically once it's over 80 mile an hour, it's a little bit like the earthquake Richter scale that's used. For each 1 mile an hour over 80 mile an hour, it just doesn't go up 1%. It rises exponentially. So we have all this data available, but obviously it's us as the insurers utilising that data as well, just to make sure we can predict it. If we can get lots of messages were going out, bold insurers warning their customers this was coming. Not a lot you can do apart from obviously make sure that your trampolines are properly, if you can, take them down before they fly off and land on someone's house. So there's lots of information that we can provide. So that's one part. And I think with regards to what we said about, and Will's absolutely right with regards to this circle about when do we use it and how do we use it, it's just really making sure, we allow our customers omni-channel to take out a policy, but we don't necessarily allow them an omni-channel approach to make a claim. So that's obviously one thing we can actually look at. Absolutely, you must know your customer. You must understand that customer. And if you're going to go down the route of some sort of ENOL process, it's making sure that particular supplier understands our customer. And I was hoping that they were going to use a word, somebody, and I just cannot remember it for the life of me. But literally, you know, what we're designing at the moment will allow the customer at any time to come off that call, that digital ENOL. So it will tell us at what stage did they go right through it, 25% through it, 50% to it, at what stage did they ask for help. So yeah, it is difficult. Cost is a driver. It's always going to be a driver there. Yeah, I think we need to give our customers the omni-channel approach. If they want to utilise and do an ENOL and a straight-through process, we should really be providing that, because I can then utilise my staff for those people that actually want help.
Yeah, okay. I think that's a very valid point. Marco, finally for you to finish it off, I'm going to be quite direct with this question. It is difficult, it is tough. Automation from both an environmental and a cost perspective, is it a choice for insurers, or is it a must now to make sure they can get the data and information required to operate competitively against some of the new entrants that are arriving?
I think it's certainly a must at this point in time, and just to be sort of very direct around that, not because of necessarily the new entrants coming in as such. I think it's a must because there is a wealth of data there already in some cases, and it's a must to start using that in the positive aspect. Now, I would probably look, just to extrapolate a bit the conversation we've just had about this. I think managing supply chains as such, using the data that insurers already have, is another benefit or an advantage that the data can bring. Now, the more of that data available, you can use it, for example, just to look at, within a certain postcode, which supply chain is better at doing, I don't know, for example, builders, right? So that's a real valuable impact that the data has from that point of view. And I think it's something that it's not only a must, but it's something which effectively insurers have used for years, but it's something that now with the automation process, you can amplify further and actually use that data to leverage a better process in terms of efficiency and making sure that the right supply chain is in place on the claim at the right time. Now, again, going back to this point around making sure that process has the flexibility to move away from the automated part to allow then, the actual experienced claims handlers to add value at the right stage. That's something which is clearly something which the data can also help provide. So that having gone through that journey, having gone through a number of claims, the data will allow you to say, actually, as Ian said earlier on, this is where the engagement drops off, or this is actually where the claims handler should step in, because they can add value. They can help, holding the hand of the customer to get to the next stage, or effectively, this is where the supply chain comes in. So data has a real great impact here. It's something that I think no one can really avoid. And from an environmental point of view, just to sort of close this piece off, it is data which allows then the insurer to use that information to try and achieve some of those targets on their environmental goals, whether it's how they decide at which level they want to deploy a type of supply chain versus another based on their customer or the actual customer that they're interacting with on that claim.
Well, thank you. I think what all of this proves is there is an ease of concept in looking at the environmental issues as easily as there is one for cost, but there is a complication in implementation of it, which we're going to have to discuss. Thank you very much to Will, Brian, Ian and Marco. The 9th of June at the Oval is when we will be looking at the environmental challenges of property claims. As you can tell from this, there's going to be lots of good ideas, but implications of actually putting this into place are very tough. We've had some fantastic insights from insurers and suppliers today. if you've got any comments in this, more than happy to talk about automation, anything to do with the environmental agenda with you. Just drop me an email at alan@iloveclaims.com. You've been listening to an ILC Home and Property Claims webinar looking towards the environmental challenges of property claims conference on the 9th of June at the Kia Oval. Thanks to all of our corporate partners. If you want to know more about ILC or would like to attend this conference, please contact me at alan@iloveclaims.com. It'll be good to hear from you.